All right, welcome to episode 10 of our Saturday Sauna Night podcast. I'm Steve.
I'm Kyle.
And we're excited to be talking with Andrea Denham from the Upper Peninsula Land Conservancy. She is the executive director of the UPLC, and excited to hear about some more about just some of the work that you guys have been doing. I mentioned earlier, I'm sort of familiar with what you do. I've had the chance to visit the Chocolate Bayou a couple times,
Sweet.
and we sort of made it to like the trailhead at the Vilmetti Peters Reserve too this past summer, and then kind of got rained out. We had
Oh,
we had
yeah,
our
no,
we had our kids with us, and yeah, they were starting to get a little bit impatient. So, uh,
I understood. I don't like being out in pouring rain either.
but I guess I just want to start by kind of asking just for an overview of what the UPLC does for people who don't know. Um, yeah, an overview of maybe just what you do and the land you work with and that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the UP Land Conservancy is a 501c3 non-governmental nonprofit, which means that we are supported almost entirely by donations from individuals and businesses and small foundations and that sort of a thing. So everything we do is supported by folks like you and people who want to get the word out about how much we all love the UP. So UPLC has been around for almost 25 years now. We are the only UP-based, UP-wide land trust to have achieved national accreditation through the Land Trust Alliance. So we're pretty stoked on that. For us, that just means that we've been put through the tests and proven that when we're making the promise of protecting land forever, we've got folks externally who have said that we're doing that in a way that, when we say forever, we mean it. We're doing it ethically with sound finances, with good legal backing, and, with input from our community to make sure that what we're doing is going to last forever. So our mission is to protect land today for life tomorrow. And we really focus in on the permanent legal protection of critical conservation lands all across the Upper Peninsula. So to date, we've protected over 7,000 acres of land in 15 counties, which is about 64 individual properties across the UP that we work with. So,
Wow.
yeah, it's a lot
Yeah,
of work. It's a good time.
that's a lot of land. I
Lots of
wanted to
space to
ask,
explore.
this might be a big question, but what what typically is the process for when a piece of land sort of comes into your care or management? Are you working with individuals mostly, or is it like timber companies or all of the above?
Yeah, that's a huge question, and it's a fantastic question. So what we do is we protect land in three main ways. So our three main tools for land protection are, first of all, you've got your more standard, typical nature preserves, like our Chocolate Bayou Nature Preserve that you were talking about, where either somebody donates a piece of property to us, or we purchase that property from a private individual or a corporation, and we open it up to the public. And we choose that based on our conservation strategies, what we see is important from a scientific standpoint and from a community standpoint. And then we'll usually build trails or do educational programming and that sort of a thing on our nature preserves.
Mm-hmm.
We also protect land that we call conservation reserves. So if you can tell the difference between preservation and reservation. So preserves, we tend to kind of leave as they are. A lot of times they're in really good shape from an ecological standpoint. But reserves are actually properties that we own and actively manage for their timber,
Mm.
but we manage them in like a really novel climate change mitigation, restoration focused. So they're open to hunting, fishing, trapping. They're actually enrolled in commercial forest. Um, and we invite people to go out there and explore them. And what we're doing is we're working on restoring those properties through active management to a more biodiverse and age diverse standpoint so that they can really continue doing the best ecosystem services that they can for our community.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then about half of the work that we do is through a project or through a program that we have called conservation easements. So every conservation easement is really, really unique. All depends on the property and the landowner. We have done conservation easements with companies. We've done them. We've worked with timber companies to talk about those, but we mainly work with private individuals. We're pretty focused on, protecting your family camp. So if you've got 100 acres and you've got your camp and you've got some forestry that you do out there and you've got a wetland and a deer blind and everything, we can work with landowners to make sure that, no matter who owns it in the future, it can't turn into a Walmart or a condo,
That makes sense.
So we work to make sure that those are still protected.
That's really cool. And I appreciate you kind of getting into a little bit of the philosophy behind that. And some of the science that goes into good forest management and things like that. That's really cool that you work with individuals like that too.
Thanks. Yeah, we especially living life here in the Upper Peninsula, I think a lot of us, we live so connected to the nature and to the weather and the forest and the moods of Lake Superior if you're lucky enough to live on on the lake shore.
Yeah.
It's not as easy as just leaving it alone and it'll take care of itself. It takes intention and relationship with our neighbors, and some of our neighbors happen to be the trees in the lakes and the wetlands.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because so many times you'll see the one that immediately jumps to mind, it doesn't have to do with the UPLC, but I think about the controversy surrounding the moose or sorry, the wolf reintroduction in Isle Royale.
Sure.
And so all the different opinions flying around, and one thing that stood out that you see is like an arguing point is, let nature be nature. And I guess, you brought up some good, I guess, ways of thinking about that, because, so often it does take a more active,
Yeah. I think we're as an organization, we're pretty vocal about our stance on climate change.
Yeah.
But no matter, what you believe the origins of it, there's really no way to deny that modern humans have an effect on our landscape, and
absolutely.
If you're going to acknowledge that, you're going to acknowledge that it's not the way it was 300 years ago. And that we're not just leaving it alone, even by never going into the woods. So it's talking about that relationship and about the science and looking at what's going on, what do we know, what do we not know, and how can we work with the land to have this reciprocal relationship, keep it taking care of us the same way that we keep taking care of it.
Yeah. I mean, and I grew up, well, we both grew up, we're brothers, but we grew up in Ishpeming together. And, as a kid, I remember seeing, there's so many, so much pristine areas around the UP for sure. But I remember, seeing a lot of our local areas and thinking, oh wow, so beautiful and whatever. And then, later on getting more interested in fishing and different outdoor activities, and kind of seeing there are so many areas that have been changed, some in pretty, drastic ways. Just with the mining boom and just development and expansion and so many things going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of people don't know even the logging history of the Upper Peninsula. Most of the trees, most of the forests around the UP are at best second growth.
Yeah.
And, they've been pushed to maple, and they've been pushed to very product heavy and like income heavy forests, as opposed to just letting them be forests. So, we always have an influence. Everything that we're doing is affecting the things around us. That goes for human relationships, animals, trees, water, all of it. So it's looking at what is the history and how can we continue that relationship.
No, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it just kind of reminded me here. I got thinking about just sort of evidences of past human activity This summer I spent some time on different rivers and like looking at old like remnants of old dams and things like that. But did the UPLC have an event that was there was something called like Ghosts on the Landscape or something like that?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's like my favorite thing that we do every year. So this is something that we've actually done 3 years now of webinars about how to read the history of the landscape by just walking around in the woods. So we teamed up with Michigan State University Extension and Tom Wessels, who actually lives out east, but he's done some work in the UP, and he's got this whole book and his own webinars about how to read the history of your landscape. You can read climate and weather and human history and what that big storm in 1900 did to the landscape. It's really cool. So we started taking his lessons and made a curriculum for it, sent it out to the local schools while everyone was shut down through COVID, and then doing hikes where we were asking people to watch these webinars with us, and then we'd go out and we'd try to read our own landscapes. So we just did that, just a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
maybe not last week.
That's stuck in my mind because I follow the UPLC Facebook page and I see the different events that come through and
Awesome.
yeah, I thought that was pretty neat. I wanted to ask, so you sort of talked about the difference between the properties you work with as preserves and reserves. So can you maybe talk a little bit about the preserves? So the dedicated nature preserves that you have and manage, and like I said, I've had the chance to visit Chocolate Bayou and then the Vilmetti Peters briefly. Need to go back maybe this winter actually. But yeah, I'd just be interested in hearing more about those properties and
For sure.
what opportunities there are there.
Absolutely. So one of my favorites and kind of a local, folks who live in Marquette and Harvey favorite is the Chocolate Bayou Nature Preserve. Darling property. It's about 13 acres. And it has just right around a mile of trail on the property. And you can get to it two different ways. You can either get to it from the Iron Ore Heritage Trail. So a lot of people will either, bike the Heritage Trail and to the entrance that we've got on that side, or for our forest forensics, we actually had everyone meet at the Michigan Welcome Center, and then we walked. It's only about a third of a mile maybe from the Michigan Welcome Center. So you can walk up the Iron Ore Heritage Trail and jump into the preserve from there, or you can go on Main Street in Harvey. And we have a small parking lot there as well. It can only hold about 5 cars, but we've got a partnership with Chocolate Township. So if there's not enough parking or there's too much snow in our parking lot, you can go park down at the Chocolate Township Marina and put in your canoe or your kayak there and then go paddle into the Chocolate Bayou as well.
Yeah.
So that's really fun. I love doing that. I love paddling around in that area. It's really, really nice. A lot of people fish in there. So that spot was, hi Karen. That spot was picked out as a nature preserve for a couple of different reasons. One of it was that it is a critical stopover for migrating waterfowl and migrating songbirds as well. So it's this really cool wetland that's just in from Lake Superior by maybe a quarter of a mile, and it has really, really dense kind of scrubby growth in it. So both migrating waterfowl and migrating songbirds that are coming along the shoreline of Lake Superior there, when the weather gets bad, they can duck into the Chocolate Bayou and have, wait out that weather in a safe place, protected from the wind and the rain and the big waves and everything like that. So it's those types of stopovers are dwindling across the Upper Peninsula and across the globe. And so we're very excited to protect that. It was also chosen for its community importance as well. That particular neighborhood didn't really have a neighborhood park or kind of forested green space to go hang out in, except for private property. And when this piece of property went up for sale, it turned out that this vacant piece of property had been kind of used as a neighborhood park. And the folks from Trout Unlimited and Ducks Unlimited and the Audubon Society all came forward and said, no, there's rare birds on this property. My kids go fishing on this property. You can't let this turn into, more condos where, this all gets cut down. We want this to be here for our kids. So we were able to work with the neighborhood to raise the $165,000 needed to purchase that in about the span of 4 months.
Wow.
So yeah, now we get people every day saying, oh, I walk my kids there. I walk my dog there. The kids, there's a couple of daycares real close by that take the kids down for hikes in the preserve.
That's great.
Frequently. Yeah, it's pretty cool spot.
I don't know about some of the other properties, but that one, I mean, like you said, it's like right in a neighborhood there. Super easy to access.
Yep.
Without, trekking out into the wood, deep into the woods. So that's really great.
Yeah, I know we've got a few folks who, live in the Harvey area, and particularly during, the worst of the pandemic, were letting us know that, they get done with their shift at the hospital. Nurses would get done with their shift at the hospitals and go walk the trail and go, take a breather in this nature preserve right next to their houses, and kind of just have that moment of being able to reconnect and re-ground themselves. So it's a pretty special spot.
So how about so some of your other preserves I'm not as familiar with. So I have your website pulled up here, and I'm just kind
of
great. So we talked about the bayou, the Vilmetti Peters. Am I saying that right?
Yep.
That one, like I said, I visited once, and that one not too far off the beaten path.
1 second. You just closed my door. Hi guys.
That one's not too far.
I thought I was the only one left earlier.
Oh, that's okay. So I was just saying that one's not too far off the beaten path. It's down that dead end road by the Meyer gas station. But could you maybe talk a little bit about that one and what's there, and how that one kind of came to be, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love the Vilmetti Peters Reserve, and it is actually a reserve. It's in our conservation reserves program. So we do this active timber management program on the property, and our hope is to use this property as a demonstration area so that folks who have their own land and want to know, how they can do this restoration style forestry on their properties, they can come learn that out on the Vilmetti Peters Reserve without, having to drive into the middle of the nowhere.
That's really cool to almost use it as like a model, like outdoor laboratory. Yeah.
This is actually one of our only reserves that is not in commercial forest. So we don't allow hunting on this property, just because it does have about 5 miles of trails on it. And since it's so close to town, it really is, there's a lot of people hiking out there. So we just say, nope, not this one. Most of our other reserves, though, are totally open for that, within regulations, of course.
Right.
So Vilmetti Peters Reserve is 123 acres of land. It was donated to us by Kathy Peters and her family, so that the Vilmetti and Peters families were, took part in the donation of this property. Like you said, it's really, really close to town. It's only a 6-minute drive from NMU's campus. So we also use it as a bit of a learning lab. So there's different classes that go meet out there. And we had a small grant with the DNR a couple of years back to install some benches and a platform. So we actually bring, the alternative high school and Sandy Knoll and all sorts of different educators will come with us and bring their kids out to the Vilmetti Peters Reserve to do class outside, which we think is just fantastic.
No, that's great. That's what I do. I'm a high school science teacher, and not actually in a physical classroom anymore. I'm working with an online school now, but absolutely appreciated those kinds of opportunities.
Yeah, we would love it. If anyone, is listening to the podcast is like, oh, I'd love to take my kids out or my group out and do our lessons or our gatherings out on the Vilmetti Peters Reserve, just let me know. We'd be happy to show you where it's at and get people out there. It's a really special spot.
That's great. So some of these other ones, not as familiar with. So Torres Woods, where is that one?
Yeah, Torres Woods is out in Autrain, Deerfoot area. It is, so if you go over the Sand River Bridge and then up the hill, you'll actually see our big highway sign.
Okay.
It's got our old branding on it.
I feel like I have seen that sign though. I know what
Yep. It just has our old logo, our old UP Land Conservancy logo, and it says Nature Preserve, I think, on it. But I think it's Trail 5 Road right there, and the parking lot is just outside of site of Highway 41. We've got a big kiosk and a little parking area back in there, and that's about 4 miles of trail as well. It doesn't have a lot of elevation change to it, but the ground is really broken up Jacobsville sandstone, so it's just bedrock right at the surface. And it's got actually this beautiful thick carpet of moss over the top of most of it, but it does make it a little bit hard to see. So it's difficult terrain. I wouldn't go on a run or anything out there.
That sounds really cool though.
But oh my gosh, it's beautiful out there. It's just thick hemlocks and this thick mat of sphagnum. And the way that the water moves on the property, it's not technically a wetland, but after a big rain or a big snow melt, sometimes we'll just get standing water that just hasn't soaked into the bedrock below it yet. It's really cool. It's just a really special, quiet place. We worked with a group of northern students a few years back to install 9 signs talking about the history and the ecology of that preserve as well. So you can follow those signs around as you're reading about that.
Yeah, and I really love being able to go into a nature preserve or just a trail system and see the interpretive signs are definitely they're nice to have, and I think they're a cool education tool too, just for learning about the history of a place or the ecology at work in a particular area.
Absolutely. And we're talking about relationships with the land and wanting to help people pay attention to what's going on. We were talking about forest forensics, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a skill you have to learn and teach yourself, or have someone teach you to pay attention and know what you're looking at. So we've partnered with a whole pile of different groups across the UP to put in some signs that people can do learning at their own pace and as they see fit when they're out in the woods without going to attend a class, for example.
Yeah, more of an informal way. That's great. I'm looking now. I'm just kind of curious personally about these. So I see the Mike Dempsey Memorial Preserve. This looks like it's out in the Western UP then.
Yep, that's out in Ontonagon. It's actually right by the Victoria Dam and the Old Victoria Historic Site, which is so cool. Have you ever been to Old Victoria?
I haven't. I've looked at it on maps and it's
a pretty cool spot. So the story behind the Mike Dempsey Memorial Preserve is really special. We were working with a family whose son had passed away. He was a veteran, and they wanted, to honor his life and the things that he loved in life, which was hiking in the Upper Peninsula, specifically on the West End. He loved big scenic vistas and protecting water and history. So we worked with the North Country National Scenic Trail, as well as a few of our other partners, to really pick out a piece of property that the family thought that Mike would have really liked. And we worked together with them and with the larger community to raise the funds to purchase this piece of property and establish that. Recently got out there and installed some signage this summer, which was just beautiful. And we're very excited. We're hoping to next year add a little bit more trail to it and to install a bench and a plaque honoring Mike Dempsey, so that we can, folks can sit and look at that gorgeous view out over the Ontonagon River and take it, especially fall colors out there. Oh man, I
Yeah.
went out there in peak fall colors this year and it was just phenomenal.
That sounds really
Really
beautiful.
beautiful.
I've passed through there before, you know, en route to the Porkies, or used to do a lot of snowmobiling around, and you know, but yeah, that's one I'll have to put that on my list. So
It's
does
a cool spot. It's a little bit funky to get to just because the access is on the North Country National
that's what I was gonna
Scenic
ask.
Trail.
Does the North Country Trail run through the property then? So
Yep. So
it
you
does.
actually
Okay.
park at the nearest North Country Trail access point, and
Yeah.
then you're gonna hike in, and there's a shallow water crossing on the Ontonagon River, so you can't cross the river if it's in flood stage, but that's easy enough to tell. It'll either be clear where you walk across or not.
Yeah,
But it's a beautiful, beautiful spot. This big sandy cliff on one side of it. That's where the overlook is. It's really special.
that sounds really beautiful. I'll have to put that on my list to check out. The last one I wanted to ask about, I didn't realize that you had property on Lake Michigamme, and it sounds like the is it the Gamber Briskey Conservation Preserve?
Yeah, yeah. So that's a cute spot as well. Um, Crazy thing about this property is that there has got to be a load of ore nearby because no compass works out there.
Really?
So we built a trail. It's a simple loop trail, so that you don't have to do too much wayfinding while you're out there. Because even I'm pretty good at just walking into the woods and not getting lost. But I get out to this area and I get so turned around. It's amazing. But that is a smaller side of the preserve, but it's down at one of the inlets to Lake Michigamme. So it's got this little stream that kind of runs down one side of the preserve, and it is just off of Holly Blue Roads. We've got a
Okay.
small parking lot again there, and there's some signage, and the loop trail is probably about a half-mile total of trail on that property. Cool bedrock, lots of really interesting plants, and again, just kind of a nice little flat spot that we're going to be installing a bench on, or I think we did install a bench on, sorry, this year, where you can sit and look out over Lake Michigamme in this kind of quiet, not big, huge, panoramic scenic vista, but in a kind of smaller inlet with lots of wetland. It's very beautiful,
Yeah.
especially around sunset. I really like the view you get from that spot at sunset.
To check that one out too, because I spend, quite a bit of time over in that area
Yeah.
especially during the summer months. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to put that on the list as well.
Yeah, we've got signage to get out there, and then of course the directions are on the website as well, so you can grab those.
No, I got the notification that I only have 10 minutes here. So
Okay.
I wanted to make sure we didn't end this without talking about the Dead River Community Forest, because that's
Excellent.
one I started following probably a little over a year ago,
Okay.
and got really excited about, and I see that just recently the purchase went through officially.
Yes, it did. It was particularly I think as anyone who's tried to buy land in the last 2 years know, the process is a little bit different and has been a little bit more frustrating over the last couple of years than it has been in the past. But we did raise all the money that we needed to purchase the property, and we closed on the property on October 5th. So we're super excited about that, and it's been a really cool process. It's actually been 5 years since we started daydreaming about the Dead River Community Forest. And, in 2018, when we first started it, first got our kind of catalyst funding to start looking at making it happen, we pulled together some major, partners and people in the area. And we thought, instead of just having a nature preserve that UPLC says, hey, this has a really cool plant or is a good, stopover for migrating waterfowl. Let's really dig in and say, what's the best, what's good for our community? What does our community want?
Mm-hmm.
And so we brought a bunch of people together and talked about, how can we make a project that is built with our community and for our community and by our community. And we all kind of came to agreement that this 161-acre piece of property that is actually adjacent to our Vilmetti Peters Reserve.
I was going to ask that. That's really cool that they're
yeah. So that with that, the big portion of the Dead River Community Forest and Vilmetti Peters combined, it's over 300 acres of contiguous protected forest. Yeah, it's really special. And it is, you know, one of the big reasons that we were looking at it was that, you know, our drinking water comes from Lake Superior here in the city of Marquette, but the water gets filtered naturally by the forests and the wetlands and the streams that surround the city. So when you look at the importance of forests to what's coming directly out of our faucets, the Dead River Community Forest area is within the 90th percentile of importance in terms of groundwater recharge and filtration for that water that comes out of our faucets when you turn on the pipes. So we, you know, looked at this and we said, well, if this is literally our city's drinking water, if this is what our beer is made out of and what our coffee is made out of,
yeah,
you know, the last thing that we want to have happen back here is seeing that affected, because, you know, that's not just our health and wellness and a beautiful landscape lost. That's, you know, more expense to our municipal buildings in the water treatment that they have to put in. And it's harder on our healthcare systems and harder on our pipes. And, you know, so we were like, let's really look at this piece of property and ask our community what they want to have happen to it. So we've heard, you know, a resounding answer that people want more trails, they want more recreation, they want their drinking water and their air quality protected, and they want an area to learn about forestry and about water and how water is important to, you know, how forests are important to water. And that's what we're doing. So we've partnered up with trail organizations, educators, anyone who wants to, really, Trout Unlimited, because it's actually cold water trout habitat, the city of Marquette Township, Negaunee Township, to bring everybody together to say, hey, this is your forest. Let's make what you want to have happen out here happen. That's been really special.
That's all really amazing. And like I said, I've been following you know, pretty closely ever since you know, around when you were still in the fundraising stages. The last thing I guess I want to ask is, with that, do you have any idea of a timeline for, you know, because I know there's so much to do, and I know I had seen recently, I think was there another survey that went out? Or was that?
We're going to be sending another survey out shortly. Yeah, I think I just sent out we actually just finished our strategic plan as an organization. So I just sent that out for folks to give us feedback on, which if anyone, you know, on the podcast wants to receive a copy of that, I'd love to send it over for your feedback as well. But what we're doing right now is, you know, we secured the property. So we purchased the property, but we were unfortunately not able to raise as much money as we needed to be able to actually start building trails and making it an educational center. So, you know, there's things like, improving the road, building a parking lot, actually building the trails, improving the trails that are already out there in order to have them handle a higher capacity. So we're spending the winter doing a little bit more research on, you know, what other plants are out there, what the cultural and historic uses, working with the Center for Native American Studies and the biology department at Northern to do some hands-on learning projects over the winter out there. And then we'll be building our management plan and continuing to raise funds. So timeline-wise, we're asking folks to just respectfully not wander out onto the property until those trails are done.
Visit one of the other preserves in the meantime.
But there you go. Visit one of the other preserves that has trails done, that has the interpretive signs up, until we can get that done on the Dead River, and then of course we'll throw a big party and we'll get everybody out there.
That sounds great.
But you know, first things first, we got to raise the money to build the trails. So
Yeah,
you'll be hearing a lot more about that in the future.
well, looking forward to seeing the progress with that then.
Yeah, me too. It's a special place back there. It really, really is.
I know I've never been there specifically, but I've kind of looked at it on Google Maps and Google Earth and sort of that's where there's a trestle bridge that crosses there, right? From the LS&I.
Yeah, yep. The LS&I really gorgeous historic trestle bridge is close to the property. It's not on our property.
Okay.
And of course, you know, we certainly do not encourage people to touch LS&I property such as railroads while they're out there, which is why we're building trails to give you a really beautiful view of the trestle bridge and the waterfall that's down there.
I know the one of the videos, like a drone video you had, just kind of showcasing that. Yeah. All right. Well, we have to wrap up, but thank you so much for your time and being willing to meet with us. And
anytime. Thank you.
Really, really great hearing, more detail about what you guys do and the philosophy behind it. So thank you so much, Andrea. This has been Saturday Sauna Night. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, everybody.